what I want to do is talk to you about a journey, and this story is not necessarily my story. It's a lot of people's stories, and I'm like one part in this bigger picture. But I chose the title about lessons from the good seed, and so you may be wondering what collaborative justice has to do with Monoman. But really, when you look at that, it provides physical and spiritual sustenance. It's an important part of a healthy ecosystem. Protecting it takes a coordinated approach, right? We've talked about legal protections here and what's being done to protect the rice and the water, about research to know about it and how it can be most healthy, education for the public. And also it's important to keep in mind that when you harvest, that you're bringing, families come together, people come together and they teach each other. And we connect to the landscape, and all of that connection to the land and what's around us that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. And it also can adapt to changing conditions. I was reading, and learning more as I was thinking about this, about sort of the cycles that it takes, and good years and bad years, and how those seeds can be dormant until the time's right, because sometimes the time's not right for something yet. But I think that those are important things that as we went on our journey to figure out how we were going to create these systems, I think that really does inform some of the work that we did. I love this quote. Orrin Lyons said that planting takes all kinds of forms and all kinds of ideas. You can plant the seeds of a stronger nation. You can plant the seeds of a better future for your children and your children's children. And when you plant those seeds, they germinate and they grow. And I've done presentations a lot about the work that we did and how what we started at Leech Lake grew and went to other places. And so a lot of times I would say, oh yeah, we planted this seed at Leech Lake and it grew into all these other things. And recently one of the grandmothers corrected me, and she said, no, my girl, she said, those seeds were planted a long time ago, generations ago. Now we're in the harvesting time for all of these things that have come together. So I think that's something that's important. And we did start something with some of this, but it's really grown. But the seeds were planted long before. And it's really important who plants those seeds. And we talked in the first panel the other day, because even up here in northern Minnesota, it's different at Leech Lake, at White Earth and Red Lake. I mean, we're all different. And especially when we talk about other places, what may work one place doesn't necessarily work somewhere else. And I'll give you an example. When we moved to Minnesota about 20 years ago or so from Kansas, I was all excited because we were going to garden again, and we had a spot for everything. And so I brought our seed for our corn, our beans, and our squash. And I thought, we're going to have this great garden. So we get things planted, and it grew. I mean, we had these bushy plants and everything. We didn't get a single bean or a corn or nothing, because it wasn't for there. And so that's something that those seeds were acclimated for another place and another time. And so we started to trade. And so a lot of what we're going to hear about are some of these ideas that were developed, that were picked up along the way, that we've traded with other places to help them for what they could use at home. And I talked about my husband, Henry. I have to show this picture here because back in the 70s, he was hanging around some guys, and they were all going around. And you may recognize some faces here. But they stood for an idea, and they planted seeds, and they fought and they bled for us, for what we have now, for all these things that come later. And so I think that that's really important to think about, that, everyone has carried this through. And even now, this old man coming from somewhere that he wasn't from originally. I told you yesterday, he always wanted to retire in northern Minnesota. That's what he said when he got out of the service. He said, that's where I want to go. And so a lot of my view of things and the work that I've done was shaped by things that he said and that he taught me. And this was back, it's hard to believe, it was 2008. I can't believe that. But anyway, this was us out front in the Itasca County District Court. And we did a ceremony, and Henry said, he said, you got to get off the pavement, right? This was February 22nd, right? We know what northern Minnesota's like on February 22nd. It was 29 degrees below zero when we left home. And everybody said, we can't go outside, it's too cold. And he's like, no, we have to get outside. But as he was talking out here, he said, he talked about the symbiont circle. And he pointed up, and we were outside, but you looked up in those windows, and all the way around, people were peeking out of the windows. And so no matter who we were, where we were from, we created a circle there to try to do something new. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what we did and how that grew and how healing can come from that. And this is different for everybody because what we did it's not for everyone. And but I think that I like this quote too, that we have to organize ourselves to get the job done. And we have to have our own vision of what that's going to look like. And that's in terms of, when we talk about protection of our land and our resources and expanding our tribal governments and whatever we want to do. I mean, it really, we have to make that vision happen. And a lot of this comes from what we learn. And we can't forget the lessons that we learn from the water and the land and wherever we are, because that shapes who we are and what we do. So why do jurisdictions collaborate, first of all? I mean, why would everybody work together? And I think, when we heard one of our speakers here just not too long ago say, we have to work with the state. When the chairman was here, right? He said, that's something that people say, oh, well, why would you do that? Well, a lot of times you have to. I mean, these are the people that are there that affect what we're trying to do. And so you might collaborate because in some cases, jurisdiction may be limited. The overlap, it can be complex. And our families are involved in multiple systems across jurisdictions. And so those service providers may be in different jurisdictions. And the money, okay, right? We can't do anything without money to be able to fund these things. And so oftentimes it's a kind of a necessity sometimes to work together so we can pool our resources to be able to get the things done that we need to do. And I've really thought a lot this last 2 days about being a tribal judge and sort of my journey from being an attorney and then a child protection attorney for Leech Lake and then the tribal judge and now a state judge. Which, by the way, these are all the things I said I would never do, right? I never wanted to do that. Matter of fact, before we moved to Minnesota from Kansas, I was getting out of the practice of law because I hate conflict. But that's not the journey, right? So obviously it wasn't what I was supposed to do. So here I stand. But it's a fact that the state does a crappy job of getting to the underlying issues and protecting things because they don't understand and they don't have the tools. They may want the outcomes, but they don't have the tools to make things different. And when we talk about collaboration, it's on a lot of different levels, right? Sometimes you're just minimally cooperating. So we might help each other a little bit with different things so that we can both operate more efficiently, so kind of help carry the load. But then it can go to the next level where you're fully cooperating, where your organizations are working together. You want to get that maximum efficiency, but you're completely separate, right? You're still that separate. And with collaboration, again, it takes it a step further, that where you're actively seeking to help each other out and having interactive efforts. And what we did through the collaborative justice programs that we're going to talk about here was we actually created something new. We talk about legal fictions, maybe that's what it was. But we are trying to use the tools that you have and maximize those through every level that you can for a different outcome. So it's important. We've talked a lot about the past couple days too about words and what words mean. And so I can say one thing and that word may mean something different to you and to you and to you. But when I talk about joint jurisdiction, we've come up with a definition based on sort of what we tried to do. So it's exercised jointly where a tribal court judge and a state court or federal court judge come together and exercise their respective authorities simultaneously, bringing together the justice system partners and leveraging resources so that we can heal and protect public safety. And really, it's creating a safety net for our people, for our resources, where we have all of the resources of the state system and the tribal court system and bringing those together to help to protect the people and help to heal. And it's not just healing to wellness or drug courts, DWI courts. That's how we started, as you'll see, to work together for that. But it's much more than that, and it's what works for someone where they are. Again, my Kansas seeds didn't work very well in northern Minnesota. They might look good from a distance, but It doesn't produce. So why would you do this? Why would you come together to exercise any kind of joint jurisdiction? Well, resource. There's always resource issues sometimes, because I know that who has all the money and the resources that they need, right? A lot of times we don't need that. The state may have some money, and we're thinking, okay, let's see what we can do to leverage that with what we have and what they have, because we really want to heal people, right? That's our goal in tribal court. That's our goal with all of this. We're healing the land. We're healing each other. But a lot of our times, a lot of our tribal courts, they don't have the infrastructure there. They don't have the resources to really be able to do that. And so I know with Leech Lake, they were on the sidelines of things and watching everybody go through state court, right? Because we're public law 280 state. So it's like you don't have that control to be able to do anything, and you don't have the resources. But another reason was to eliminate some of that us versus them attitude. And Cass County and Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, it's kind of like I think we heard earlier, it's like kind of that constant fight, bad relationships over time. But by working together, we were able to overcome some of this. Because what's the goal? We're trying to heal the land. We're trying to protect our resources. And it takes all of us. I mean, how many times have we heard that over the last couple of days? It affects all of us. It takes all of us. Because, Henry said, and I've heard this, he said, water is it's the great equalizer. And he said, none of us, he said, from the fly on the wall to me to, everybody, none of us can live without water. Not one of us. We all need that. And so it really does help to do that, to bring us together. So when we came together in joint jurisdiction, it also was an ability to increase public trust and confidence in our own systems. Because there was a time that there wasn't a lot of trust even in the Leech Lake system at one time. Maybe there still isn't. But, the state system too. But again, it's like with limited resources, there's things that you want to do. So how are you going to get there? How are you going to be able to do that, to protect those resources, to protect the people, if you don't have that in place? And of course, from the judgely perspective, right, we want to reduce recidivism, stop that revolving door. Because the fact of the matter was that because Minnesota is a public law 280 state, we know what those statistics were, and it was all tribal members that are going back through that system over and over again. Our jails in northern Minnesota are filled with our people. They still are. It's unfortunate. But these are some of the reasons why working together collaboratively helped. So some of the, and I'm not going to read through all of this, but some of the elements, if you look at when you're trying to do this and working together for something, it's really taking that problem-solving approach. It has to fit your own culture, your circumstances there, of your local system. And this focus on root causes, we heard a lot about comment yesterday about, the water levels and what Enbridge did. And I have a place on Upper Rice Lake in Clearwater County. And you know that, Jamie. I mean, driving down 2 highway, I was physically ill to see what was happening to the land that I love out there. I'm not even from here, but I love that place. And to watch that water in the lake get drained away as they pulled it out for road projects and everything else. But we got to look at those root causes. And that's something that all of these courts and these programs that we talk about, we're looking at getting underneath that, at the root causes and breaking down those silos. We have to work together if we're going to be able to do this. And really kind of having those improved outcomes, because, Tecumseh said that about, when we stand together, I don't have the, I'll botch the quote if I try it, but, when we put those twigs together, we're stronger together when we're coming together with our partners. And the other thing is all of these places, they had the same challenges, staffing, geographic distance, funding. I mean, it's in all the work that we try to do, you have to be so many places. And then you get that unequal treatment that we talked about, where you get one person that gets arrested and charged and someone else doesn't. I mean, it's so unequal. But those are some of the challenges that are out there. So I want to talk about where some of this work began, because I had no concept or idea that 21 years later that I'd be standing here. But these issues, those waters, it doesn't stop at the reservation boundary for any place. It affects all of us. And I heard somebody talk about the the rivers, how they said that, well, we call that river the same name all the time, right? But it always changes because that water keeps going, and so it's never the same. We may call it the same thing, but it changes. So I want to go back in time a little bit to when I was first appointed at Leech Lake, before then. And I wish I could say that these things have changed. I mean, this is an ongoing fight. It's like the fight that you are engaged in with protecting the water and protecting the rice. It's going to be an ongoing thing. But at the time, these are some of the statistics. And it's the same way. I hate to say that. It's the same way, up and down a little bit. But when I started at Leech Lake Tribal Court, they said, we want you to grow the court. We want you to expand what we're doing. We want to start getting our people out of the state system. We want to start to have people heal. But as you can see, things expanded. But in 2006, when I started, we weren't doing a whole lot. I mean, in terms of, it was fairly limited. And then we added on a little bit at a time. But we didn't have any hand in those criminal cases because it was just watching people go back through that system over and over and over again and get more and more damaged, like the land. And we talk about that when these things happen over and over and over again. Our resources are depleted. They're killed when these things happen. But it's hard because we don't have a lot of resources, right? So this is what the Leech Lake Tribal Court was, what it looked like in 2006. I mean, it was fairly small, and we'd been there. I mean, but they said, okay, grow the court. And they said, oh, by the way, we don't have any more money, and you can't even more people. So go forth and make this better. And so, okay. And this is what it was like in the surrounding counties at that time. And unfortunately, we're kind of back to this in Itasca County, with the methamphetamine use and the effects. And to me, I mean, this is the effects of historical trauma that we talk about, and the fact that people can't heal, and the unresolved grief. And I've seen it having been there. It's like over generation, year after year, it gets worse and worse. And so the situation in Itasca County back when I started wasn't great. Cass County, I mean, we know that they didn't have good relationships, obviously, either. And it was not a good place for our people. And Cass County for ninth graders, I mean, look at this. I mean, and I think that these are the effects of everything that we've been talking about here the last couple of days. So that was kind of the lay of the land when I started. And then Cass County, Judge John Smith and the director of probation, they wanted to do a DWI court, right? But they knew that they couldn't do it without Leech Lake's help, because most of the people that were coming back through the door over and over again were Leech Lake band members. So again, how could they be able to help that healing? And they knew they did a crappy job at it, right? They needed help. And so I happened to be in the tribal council offices the day that they came up and asked. And after they left, the chairman called me in and he said, "What are they trying to do to us now?" And I said, well, this is what they want to try to do. And this may be a way to look at that if we collaborate and work together on this, that some of the goals that you want to achieve to protect your people and your resources and do that healing, this might be a way to do it. So maybe we should look at that. And so, we talked yesterday too about the fact that our tribal court systems, we don't want to be like the state system. I mean, if you look at the differences there, those all of the good work and the things that we do in tribal courts are so much different than state courts. And they're trying, and a lot of them, but it's kind of the same thing, right? So as someone said, well, you can't pound square pegs into a round hole. It's like no one's trying to force anything. Let's look at maybe if we have some common goals. So in the instance here, we're talking about how we protect our water, how do we protect the rice, our resources. So when you look at this through the lens of common goals, we start to think, okay, we don't have to lose our identity and the way we do things in this. We don't have to be like you. But if we start to look for ways that we might be able to work together so that we get what we need and what we want, and so that outcomes are better, there's some places that we can work together. And so we started to look at maybe, what are those common goals? Okay, well, disproportionate minority contact, right? Those statistics suck. They still do. But it's like, that's something that we want to see. We don't want to see our kids going through that revolving door. So that's something that both systems wanted to try to affect. They didn't want our kids taken away. And we know, with the enactment of ICWA, what that was like. And it still happens today. But that was a goal that we wanted to work on. And also addressing drug and alcohol abuse and the effects of that. Because everywhere, not just here or there, it's devastating our families with these effects. So these are things that, okay, well, maybe there's some areas that we've got common goals that we can work together to achieve some of these goals that we're trying to do for our people. And also DWIs and traffic fatalities. Because as I said on that previous slide, Cass and Itasca counties were some of the deadliest counties for drinking and driving, and also people getting hit on the side of the road because they didn't have transportation, right? So they're walking back and forth between Cass Lake and Walker just to get to court. And so people were dying along the side of the road, literally. So these are some of the things that we thought, okay, this is a goal that we can work together on and put things together. And so we started to work on a joint powers agreement. So like, how are we going to come together? And maybe someone said that our first courts, they said it was sort of like a fast skate across thin ice because it wasn't real popular and we just did it, okay? And someone said too, if we'd asked permission to do some of the things that we'd asked to do, we'd probably still be waiting. And that's why we got to take action, right? Direct action, get out there and you got to do it. You got to be on the front line and you can't be afraid to do that. And so we came up with common goals. Let's work together where we can on access to justice, administering justice for effective results, and fostering public trust, accountability, and impartiality. And so being the lawyers that we are, right? I mean, we keep trying to draft up these things and it kept getting more and more complicated and we kept throwing it away because you know what? This is it. We want to work together on these goals to try to make things better. And so we signed this joint powers agreement, and with Leech Lake and Cass County, this was the very first time that a tribal flag was installed in a state district court in 2007. And this is in Judge Smith's courtroom, and so we did our flag presentation there. And you see this more and more, that state courts are recognizing our authority and the legitimacy of tribal courts and coming together as partners. And so almost a year to the day, was when we were outside on that cold February morning. And the Leech Lake flags were installed in all three of the courtrooms in Itasca County. You know what, I think it's important that we have to look back sometimes about why we're doing what we're doing. Because sometimes I think that people see that flag, that Leech Lake flag there, and they wonder, well, why is that there? And I think we need to continue to educate people. It's like with protecting our resources. We have to continue to educate people about what they need to know and why it's important. And so over time, we started with the adult DWI and drug courts. And then we expanded into some other areas to be able to protect and heal the people and protect resources. And so we called it Bomanim Anishinaabe, Care for the People. It was kind of a language thing too, that we had some discussions when we were trying to name it, right? And so people are saying, okay, Bomanim Anishinaabe, Care for the People. And then someone else said, well, Bomanim, that's kind of like nagging people or like bothering them. And it's like, well, kind of that too, because sometimes you need, it's like the grandmas, right? Like Judge Abby, they're like, no, you're going to do this. So that's part of it too. But the mission that we had was to heal spirit, mind, and body. Look at those root causes of crime and delinquency. And the model, it was strengths-based, client-centered, all of these things. And it was guided by the 4 hills of life, the seasons, the Anishinaabe values, and wraparound principles. So we took, what do they say, best practices, right? The things we know that work, with what we know that works for our people, which is knowing who you are. So our joint jurisdiction wellness courts in Cass and Itasca County, we started out, as I said, in 2006 and 2007. And we're the first, as we said, and we thought, well, surely someone has to be doing this, right? It just made sense. So we're looking around for other models because we just took the Nike approach and just did it, whatever. It's like we didn't ask permission, we didn't put anything in writing. the Cass County ITASC, or the Leech Lake Cass County Court, a lot of people don't realize this, but we operated on a handshake for a year. We didn't have anything in writing. And so we were just trying to come together to improve outcomes, because you know what? Our people were dying, just like the land is dying because of all the effects of all of this. And so we recognize that this is a community problem. And there's a lot of people that aren't tribal members that live on the Leech Lake Reservation. And so that's what they said, let's work together. Let's improve our whole community. And so the first joint jurisdiction programs were born. Now these adult courts, it's a partnership, and it takes all of us in this circle. And so we had the tribal judge and the state judge. We had people from the county attorney's office, public defender's office. And a lot of times, money's tight, right? So the public defender's office are like, oh, we're not going to be involved in that because we don't have time or money. So there's where Regional Native Public Defense in Cass Lake, they came in and stepped up. And this is what it takes when we're talking about the work that you do, because you have to figure out, we have something over here that we need some help with. So who can fill that gap for us and help with that? And so organizations like Regional Native Defense stepped in to be able to help. And so it was a partnership for our counterparts, judge to judge, and all of that, all coming together to change the outcome and for healing. And it worked. And people, again, they started to watch to see what we were doing. But we started to see benefits that were so far out what we originally intended or thought would happen. And so where we were thinking about, okay, well, we're going to help the participant, right, and make sure that they get healing and things like that. But you know what? It ended up helping that person's whole family. And people were empowered, and they were able to get out of abusive relationships and have healing in their own families. And we used to, people used to be so proud of how many days of recovery they had, and it was in the tens of thousands that, when we would talk about, and it was not that many people, we're talking about 30 or 40 people. But their time and their healing, it expanded just with that little seed, that planting of that. And you know what? It worked. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we did for kids. And so when we're talking about the recidivism rates for our juvenile delinquency cases, in Cass County and Leech Lake, it went down to 6.6 for our wellness courts, and in Leech Lake, Itasca, 16% versus 60+% for recidivism rates nationally and statewide. And so it was working because people saw, okay, well, we're working together for healing. We don't have to be like you. We don't have to walk your way. But you know what? We can bring all of our resources, all of our tools to the table to accomplish that. And so other things that we've started to get into, because it's like, well, this worked really well. And so we did a spinoff. And so then we started to work with whole families, right? Because this is a family thing. And it takes everyone, and it affects everyone. And so we had it was sort of a track with the wellness court, but we were able to do this family drug court to come together to expand that, all because we started to work together with one thing, and it helped with others. So we thought, okay, let's do juvenile delinquency cases. It's working so well there because we need to heal our kids. As part of this, we heard Amy talk about her niece. It's like our kids are so wise, and they're suffering so much because of generation after generation, these effects, it piles up like the snow, and people just get buried. But with these cases, we started to take cases they'd start out in district court, we bring them into tribal court, work together under a joint powers agreement. And the one good thing, I told you yesterday about what I really miss about being a tribal court judge, is I had a lot more flexibility to really do some healing work. And to actually, we talk about those root causes. So it's like, okay, you're staying up all night playing video games, I'll take your video game. And so I think some of these lessons, it's like by working together, there may be something that you can't do, but you can. And then if we put together with what you have, you can really get some things done. And so we had service plans and case managers. At one time when we had things up and going and we were going full bore, in the tribal court, we had a full-time mental health professional. We had case managers. We had persons that did substance use disorder evaluations. I mean, all of that to really get to healing. We had all those things in place. And then, again, what they said, okay, we want you to do all this stuff, but we're not going to give you any money. As a tribal court judge, I really felt like there wasn't a lot that I could do sometimes. Because, I mean, it's kind of a joke. Like, I could make orders, and I didn't have any way to see if people were doing that or following through, or how else I could help them. And so we actually did a cross-appointment order, because Cass County was trying to do things in a different way in their probation for the kids. They wanted to make a change. They saw these things didn't work. And so what we did was a cross-appointment order, because all these kids were in state court already for something. And so we were just diverting them out of the state system. It's kind of like that. You have to get it, get that focus someplace else. And so we did a cross-appointment order, and it didn't cost the tribe anything. And they supervised in our way, the way we wanted it done, in a more holistic way. And then that worked, so we just kept adding on. It's just like this. It's like all the efforts that you have. I mean, you have people that are on the front line, and you've got people that are doing the legal work behind, and everybody that's supporting you in different ways. So things just build, and you get stronger and stronger. And so we started this diversion program, because a lot of times what was happening, again, because of lack of resources, right, we have to go someplace else. And so when our kids and families were having a hard time, if they needed to go to treatment or something, we didn't have anywhere for them to go at Leech Lake, right? So what do? We send them away. And all that does, that just perpetuates everything that we're talking about, that cutting off of your relationship to the land and where you are and where your healing is. And so we started under this program, we started to work with people, and we had our own diversion board. And so we were able to bring people in. Did I get past that? Oh, a reentry, there we go. I can't even work my own equipment. So these cases with the reentry, so we started to work together even before there was a problem, like before people went. And so we could do prevention and intervention, right, with some of this work. And that's how this builds, because you may have one person that's out on the front line doing that, and they're going to inspire other people in the work that they're doing. And we were able to do amazing things, because we started to say, okay, you bring this to the table, you bring this to the table. And it's like, I couldn't do it on my own as a tribal judge there. I didn't have all the stuff, right? But it's kind of like having a potluck. It's like, okay, you bring the rice and you bring this. And so when you put that all together, then you have a smorgasbord, because we work together. And so however you want to look at this, for whether someone should or shouldn't do this, or whether they're legal fictions or whatever, we had to have some documents after a while, right? Policy and procedure manuals. And so we had our joint powers agreements. And then we started to it was interesting to see what happened, because it started to kind of go out from the court, because people started to see this was working when we picked one thing that we could work together on. And so the boards of commissioners for the counties around there, they passed resolutions in support of us working together. And we had our MOUs, of course, that spelled out what our roles were and our responsibilities. Again, responsibilities, because it was like, this is what you promised to bring to the party, right? And we need that. We need that piece of it, because we don't have it, because it takes all of us. So these are some of the documents that we had that we put together for that. And it expanded from there. I couldn't believe it. It's like, okay, I'm like, okay, let's keep going. They haven't told us no yet, right? So we kept going. And so we were able to do things like, we didn't have guardians ad litem or CASA in tribal court, right? No money, no resources. And so what we were able to do is do a contract with the 9th District and have them come in, again, learn about what it's like to be in tribal court. What are the needs of our people? And so we were able to get some things in place that we were never able to have before under that. And oh, by the way, we talk about, the effects of all of this and the number of people that are in prison. Well, a lot of them have kids, and there's no way that they're able to connect a lot of times. And so we were able to bring technology to the table, right? We had this is like way before the Zoom days in the pandemic, but we had interactive video conferencing. And so not only could we link up to any place in the state through that from the tribal court, but parents could appear. They could hook up from prison, and they could have visits with their kids. It's not ideal to have kids come in to be able to visit with mom or dad in the tribal court, but at least they get to see them, And so that was a benefit. Again, it promoted that healing. And then there started to be meetings between the tribal council and the boards of commissioners. So this goodwill, it started to change things a little bit. And everybody started to see that power of working together. And so they started having joint meetings. You know, I don't know exactly where that is. I know that they do still meet some. Relationships go up and down. It's like things in Itasca County. If you've read the news, let's just say it's not exactly the way I would have it. But those are the realities. And we have to weave our way through there and pick out what we can to achieve the goal of healing and restoration of things. So those were some of the agreements. And it was amazing to me to see how popular this became and how it really started to be recognized as a model of working together and what you could achieve when you're collaborating like this. And so, you know, you can see there was awards that the programs won, and national organizations did resolutions in support of this. So really that opened the door for other people, because someone has to be brave enough, like you are, as water protectors, to be on the front line. Someone's got to do that, right? Or it'll never happen. Somebody has to be brave enough to do that. And then it starts to be, okay, well, it worked, right? And then you get more people coming in. Someone said with the first one with Leech Lake and Cass County, they said, we kind of cracked the door open a little bit. And then with these other ones, we kicked the door open. And that's what you're doing. You're kicking the door open for all this work that's happening. Because then everyone can come in behind you and come together to make things better. So as we started to do this, other jurisdictions, other places were looking at this because they started to see, hey, you know, when we're working together, then we can get a lot done. So we came up with this catchy thing called Project Team. Together, everyone achieves more. And so what we wanted to take this model out to help other people, to show them how they could heal at home, right? And try to do what we did. And so we worked with these other pilot sites. So we went to California and we went to Alaska. We even tried to, you know, work with the Northern Cheyenne and the federal court system and let them set up their own courts, right? But they're not Leech Lake. They're not Anishinaabe, right? It's not the same values. You know, we have similar instructions. We have similar values and things that guide us, but it's not the same here as there, right? Those plants may grow a little bit, but they're not going to produce. So we would get together, and this is what it took. We all came together, and we ate, and we discussed these things. And it was folks from the tribal court and from everywhere else, and we were coming together to think about what that common problem was, what they were trying to achieve, because it's the same thing. It's about healing for families and for kids and for respect for where you are. And so we had these big planning meetings, and this happened to be in Alaska. And so everyone looked at this bomb and in model that as, you know, kind of as a framework. But again, it's different everywhere. So this didn't come out very, very well in the slide. But every place they have their own instructions, right? Their own sense of place. And so at Keynote, they had their own values wheel, which was different than Leech Lake. But the approach was the same, because you're taking who you are to heal and infusing that in all the work that you do and getting back to that sense of place. And it took time. This was the team in Alaska when they finally signed their agreement with the state of Alaska to do their court. It took them like 1.5 years because the bureaucrats, first of all, you know, they started out and they said, well, this concise little 40-page thing that you put together, really it would be a lot better if it were like 240 pages. And so then that complicated things. And so then it got kicked back and forth. I don't know if they thought maybe they'd just forget about it, but they didn't. And so they persisted, and they kept coming back, and they didn't say no. They wouldn't take no, and they just kept going. And so they were able to get something going. This is Judge Christine Williams there, and then the blonde-haired lady is Suzanne Kingsbury, and they're from Christine Williams was the chief judge at Shingle Springs Band of Miwok, and then the other Judge Kingsbury from El Dorado County, California. And actually, they sort of, again, they built on to the work that was before. And because they, again, recognition of the power of the tribal court and how they could do things, the state court said, well, we want to work together, so we're going to appoint your tribal court judges as judges in state court, as special magistrates, so we can work together. And so that expanded what the tribal court was able to do. And they were able to use that for other things because the relationships, they improved. And for instance, they started out, and so they did this model, and they thought, well, we're going to address truants, right? The kids that were getting kicked out of the mainstream school, and everyone going to the tribal school. And we don't want that to be like a bad thing, right? We've got to address truancy. But when they started to work together on that common problem, even though everybody has a different perspective, they got different goals, different organizations, it really went out from there. And it got to be about a lot more than just truancy cases. And so, and actually in their second year, when they worked themselves out of a job. That second year, they didn't get any referrals because the whole system changed behind it because they were willing to take that chance and work together. And it's happening. I mean, I think I've listened to people talk about Judge Metzen, and I know Judge Metzen. I thought it was so cool. It's like I stayed outside of all of these things, but it was like, yes, people see it. And that's about that education. That's about that relationship building. That's about saying the passion that's inside you and why you're trying to do what you're trying to do. Because it's not about being right or winning. It's about healing. It's about all of that we're trying to get back to. And it grew from there, right? And so now this model of people working together somewhere along that spectrum of maybe it's two judges taking the bench together like we did, or just kind of figuring out how they can work together for better outcomes. All these places now are doing something by working together. And no one lost their authority. No one was underneath anyone else. It's joint jurisdiction. You're coming together and you're taking everything that each system has. We always like to kind of compare it to the Iditarod sled race in Alaska, right? I mean, we're all going the same place, right? Everybody's, racing their dogs and everything because that's where we're trying to get. We looked at those common goals, right? The state system's trying to get there. The tribal court system's trying to get there. So for us, it was kind of like hooking up our dogs and sleds and trying to get there together by working together. And it covers everything. It's like the work that you're doing. And I see it even where I am because it opens eyes, whether you realize it or not, that people are starting to see the importance of, and I hear people, because, I'm out, and you hear people a little bit more, there are people that are community residents and things, and they start to have a different view of the water and the land, and that maybe we're not just trying to be unreasonable or just trying to protest. It's not about that. This is about survival for what sustains us, the land, our resources, all of that. And so it developed into whatever worked, wherever they were, so that they could find that healing. And it really worked. When you look at how the systems changed, it was those truancy cases started to go away. That even some of the child welfare cases, I talked about Shingle Springs, when they worked themselves out of a truancy job, so they said, well, okay, let's start working on child protection cases. And so they did their own little diversion thing where the cases came out and they diverted them from state court, and then rather than a petition getting filed or people getting further into that system to damage them even more, to perpetuate all this destruction and the colonization and everything that's happened, they said, okay, we're gonna divert. And so the state judge and the tribal judge started to work with these families. And you know what? All the families that went through that, kids never got taken from home. They stayed right there on their homelands, in their own homes. And they had a chance because something different got created. But it was amazing just to see how everything changed in the individual and the community and between the systems, because people opened their ears and they opened their eyes and were willing to work together on a common problem. So, what do we see? And I think in your work, I think I've heard this, a few times, you're talking about the money's needed. It's not cheap, right, for what you do. People have to get where they need to go. But there may be resources, financial resources that are out there that you can leverage by working together. And there's new funding. There may be things that you may not think, okay, this isn't available for me maybe as this nonprofit. But hey, if I partner with this organization, they may have access to all this other money that I never could have gotten. so we can get that. And this is the most important thing to me. It's kind of in the middle there, but it's that direct hand in healing. Because again, when all this stuff started, we were just sitting on the sidelines, right? There wasn't anything. Everybody just kept going back through the system, and we weren't able to do anything. And so we were really able to get to that healing and that keeping people at home more than we would before. And, you know, we've gone over these some. I mean, again, there was a lot of good benefits that happened. And then talking about place. You know, I showed you, started out for where the Leech Lake Tribal Court was and in the facility center there. But when we worked together, they needed, you know, we wanted more space for programming and for everyone to come together. And so because of the collaborative efforts and everyone that was trying to come together, Leech Lake was able to get funding and to get their own justice center. And so that's another benefit that came out of everyone working together for home, for what worked there. And then this space you can see kind of at the end there, I don't know, on my, kind of at the end of, all the way at the end of the hallway. Some of these programs, you know, kind of my caveat, some of these things didn't carry on due to loss of grant funding and other reasons, but they're circling back to pick up a lot of that. And so now even this is going to be repurposed, and so that way when the Bomb and M program comes back, then there's a place for it. It has its own spot to be able to do that, to get back to some of that healing work. And I want to talk a little bit too about, and I think when Terry yesterday talked a little bit about Tribal Policy, Law and Policy Institute. I'm going to give a little pitch for them here, but here's some information about their work, what they are, and the Healing to Wellness Courts projects. And again, it's a little bit one-off from the work that you're doing maybe. But I think that if you think about that collaborative spirit and finding allies, I've heard that word a few times over this last couple of days, that there are allies that are out there that see the importance of that are out there. I know a lot of non-Indian people that are out there, and they see what's happening. They see what's happening to the land and what's happening to the rice. And so you got to find those allies. And they've got all kinds of resources, you know, for collaborations. If you're interested in something like that, I'll make sure that Terry's got this. But if people want to know more about this joint jurisdiction and how we work together to build these systems, there's publications that are out there that TLPI's put out, and then other resources. And I think that there's a lot that springboards from this that you can really learn from. And I'm going to try to play this video. We'll see if this works out. But there's some contact information here, but we'll see if I can get this to play.